Well, we were listening to Mahir Zain, inshallah, and it's time now for the weekly edition of Crime Talk with the chairperson of eThekwini Secure, Imtiaz Syed. Imtiaz, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayat.
Jazakallah khair and so much for your time. Now, Imtiaz, let's talk about communities. And I think this is extremely important. We're talking about communities that need to be united in a purpose. And generally, when we see community initiatives, somehow, we see disagreement, but also the danger of fragmentation in communities. And I think this is something that we need to be very, very aware of as far as the unity of the community, particularly when it comes to community issues, when it comes to issues that impact on generally everyone that belongs to that community.
No, absolutely. Inayat, what we're seeing of late, and I think to generally the minority communities, mobilization is a thing that never happened before. And now that we see ourselves in that space where there's a need for mobilization, we're finding that there's fragmentation within communities where there are different groupings of individuals that feel that what they're standing for is not, in fact, what a different lot of people are standing for. And we're finding this quite often, and communities are now starting to infight in terms of leadership. And that's a cause for great concern because when we're speaking to the authorities, we need to learn to speak with one voice. And that is something that we're finding as a commonality across all areas, where we're finding different groupings and they're forming themselves into different organizations, which is an absolutely great thing. So I've made recommendations to different groupings in the Chatsworth and Phoenix area to say, let us have a sit down, let it be an all day long, and let us get our internal grievances out the way. Let us speak with one voice in a projected understanding of what it is that we need to prioritize as community. Because what we need to understand in it, we may be starting out and coming from COVID, coming from the unrest, coming from now the floods, and coming from all of these things. What we find is that communities want to do things. The problem is that they're not making a concerted effort to do it in unity. And that's a problematic, especially when we're speaking to authorities. We're not speaking with one voice, and that's a problem. We find this during amongst communities in general, but we also find it in the religious sector as well. The religious sector needs to also come forward and start standing unitedly, irrespective of your religion. Let us stand together in unity because there's segregation in that as well.
Well, we've seen so much of that happen in the last few years, really, Imtiaz, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And also, at the same time, to try and understand what are the driving factors, what are the motivating factors for that fragmentation and disunity. We need to address those with a sense of urgency.
No, absolutely. Quite a few of the times we see that egos come into play. People have started out something and want to gatekeep that organization or want to hold on to it as though it belongs to them. When we start and create community based organizations, what we must remember, especially when we have a membership, is that it belongs to the members and not to the leaders. And leaders need to start learning to listen and not talking as much. We need to listen to communities. And when you put all leaders together in a room, ultimately in the beginning of that discussion they end up on different pages, but when you really do a post-mortem of the actual discussion you'd find that the problems are exactly the same. And when we start analyzing it and compartmentalizing how we attack this, we find that we can have leaders working together even though they may agree to disagree. But ultimately, if they fit the purpose and they want to get something done and they come together, we find a winning solution.
Exactly. And I think at the same time, the community basically loses focus and also at the same time, a loss of confidence. And that is the reason when we talk about apathy on the part of the
Absolutely.
community, one needs to obviously look at the leadership. One needs to look at these organizations as to how much they are contributing towards this apathy within communities, minority communities.
Correctly so. We attend ratepayers meetings and civic body meetings month on month, and it's exactly the same thing that people speak about with no solution. It's basically just becoming a complaints platform, and that is something that we need to start addressing. So we've started out. I mean, we started out the eThekwini Joint Ratepayers Association, right? And we find many communities wanted to gatekeep that, so they started forming these ratepayers associations without a clear understanding of what we were asking for. The ask was very simple: make them smaller so that they become manageable. Don't let it be a massive thing representing an entire ward where you can't really manage all the issues. Let people start working together in their small constituencies so that they can address the issues at the ground, on the ground for themselves.
Well, definitely, it's a case of the example of eating an elephant. You got to eat it piece by
Yeah,
piece. The thing is,
absolutely.
and so, like you mentioned, it becomes so big that complete focus is lost as to what the real issues are, what are the key issues that one needs to address. And makes a lot of sense, looking
Yeah.
at basically smaller organizations, but focused at the same time, Imtiaz.
No, absolutely. We've got to hone in on exactly what our issues are. I mean, you come out to some meetings and we're discussing flood disaster management, and people come out to speak about grass cutting and regular service delivery, which isn't the focus point at this time. So we've got to start learning to prioritize things. And it's not for everyone to have a complete understanding of how the entire scheme of things work. Everyone needs to stick in their lane and say, okay, I'm dealing with this area, let me be there. And the climb up to how we all bring it together, let's leave that to different bodies and different organizations to deal with.
Yes, Imtiaz, now you mentioned that you spoke about the Chatsworth and the Phoenix area.
Yes.
Just a bit more information on this initiative.
Yeah. So basically, what had happened in the Chatsworth area, there was a grouping of individuals that were formed by different organizations like SAMREM and the civic body and all of those things that came together. And apparently, the premier had came out to address them, and then we had the city management come out to address the issues. However, in that particular meeting, there was another grouping of individuals that came in either on the CPF ticket, but they weren't invited. It was a closed meeting for about 14 to 15 people. They were not invited. But in that meeting, they raised concern that the people that were actually sitting in that meeting didn't represent the community. Now, who are we to say that? You can form and mobilize yourself in terms of any way you want to. And if you had a meeting with a particular official or management of the city, then you have a right to do so. There's no one that can gatekeep that and stop you from doing it to say that you don't represent and I represent. Everyone should be doing their little bit in order to get things done. And that's the most important thing. So we should be standing in unity in terms of that. We shouldn't show division when it comes down to us dealing with officials, because then we really seem as though we don't know what we're doing and we don't really have real mandates from our community.
Well, Imtiaz, Jazakallah, as always, for your time with us on Salam Media and on the weekly edition of Crime Talk. We wish you all the best, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Chairperson of eThekwini Secure with us this morning on Crime Talk, Imtiaz Syed. And yes, we definitely need a lot of direction. We need a lot of guidance as communities if we want to make an impact and we want to address our issues. But next up, we're going to go for a break and we're going to take a listen to Walid Bata. I haven't heard him for a long time. Guide the Ummah.